Hello and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about the best books I've read in 2019. Now when I looked at my Goodreads read shelf and looked at my 5-star reads, I saw a lot of fantasy in there and of course some other books as well. So I thought I'm gonna do a special video dedicated to the best fantasy books I read in 2019. But today we're talking about best books I read in 2019. Everything other than fantasy, basically. So let's see, I have 5 books to talk about. I thought about doing either 10 or 5, but truth be told, I only have 5 non-fantasy books here. So I was like, I'm not gonna include the 4-star reads because that's not technically the best books I read in 2019. So book number 5 is Sadie by Courtney. This is a young adult mystery. And I picked this one up before I started on my mystery kick in October this year because I picked this up as a part of an experiment I did where I took 5 young adult books on BookTube and I read them to just see if they're worth the hype. So there were a lot of different genres in here, but what the most interesting thing and takeaway for me was that 2 of these books have ended up on this list. And one of them is Sadie, actually. I listened to this on Audible because everyone recommended to do so. This is partly written in podcast form and the audiobook is narrated by different characters. So it's really done really well and it's narrated as it is, like it feels like you're listening to a podcast, it's what I'm trying to say. So we follow Sadie here and then we follow this reporter who is looking for Sadie because Sadie went missing. So this book is about how Sadie had a really tough childhood. She suffered from abuse and she was from a dysfunctional family. She only lived with her mother and sister and the mother was not really reliable, so it was her and her sister for better or for worse. And they were really close to each other and Sadie was almost like a mother figure to her sister. But then her sister is found dead and the investigation doesn't give any results. So basically they are very poor and no one really cares what happens to some people living in a trailer park. So Sadie takes matters in her own hand and then suddenly disappears like a year after the death of her sister, and she goes on to finding out what happened and she goes after the killer. So we alternate between Sadie's perspective on going on her journey and this journalist who is also trying to figure out what happened to Sadie. Now, I really love this. I mean, I think the audio really made this like such an amazing experience. And I think I watched so many rave reviews. I mean, I don't remember watching any reviews of people not liking this book. I think if you're into YA or if you're into mysteries, even if you're not into YA, I think you should give this a go because it is really well done. Book number 4 is also a mystery. This is a mystery thriller and in this case we're talking about The Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. I listened to this one as well on Audible. I really enjoyed that experience. I mean, it is a really well-rounded, well-written mystery thriller. Out of all the Ruth Ware books I've read, I mean, I practically read them all and I made a video about it. I'll link it for you somewhere. But this is the best one of hers. It is definitely my top Ruth Ware book. And I will definitely check out whatever she writes in the future. So basically in this one, we follow this nanny. She is in prison and she is accused of a murder she did not commit. And she's writing these letters to this lawyer in which she explains her case, why she ended up in prison, and why she's basically innocent. So through these letters, she explains what happened, and then the story evolves from there. So I really like this letter writing perspective. In the beginning, it was really much focused on how she struggles in finding the right words and how she tries to explain everything in the best way, because she says No one listened to her explanations before she was convicted. And so she knows that she has to say everything and tell everything. Every little detail counts. So as the story goes on, we kind of move away from this letter writing perspective, but then we come back to it at the end. So that's nice, tied together, I believe. This nanny applies for this position, which seems too good to be true, in this remote house where she has to take care of some children. So this house is a bit special because this is a smart house. So basically, the owners took this old Victorian house and they completely renovated it and made it into a smart house. So everything you see and you regulate through your phone, an app on your phone, or through some panels on the wall. So even, of course, the lights, the heating, but even the shower. So when she goes to take a shower the first night, there are different settings for different people. So I guess she tries to figure out what's going on and which setting is hers. And there's always something malfunctioning in this app. And there's just an uneasy feel to the whole house from the start. So she gets the job, and then suddenly, after one day of being there, she has to stay alone with the kids because the owners, the parents, leave for a business trip for a longer period. So she's really thrown into this situation and she has to figure things out as she goes. But there's always some odd things with the house, with the electricity. And then, oh my God, this was the worst or the best part while listening, was like she couldn't sleep at night because there were some creaky noises from the attic. It really gave me the chills listening to these noises. Why? Because she couldn't sleep at night. I didn't see any of the twists coming, and I think overall it was a really well-rounded book. There was nothing I would have changed about it. I love the characters, of course I love the setting, I love the mystery elements, and there's always these horroristic tropes. We have this malfunctioning house, we have of course the creepy noises from the attic, we have the weird dolls appearing everywhere. So at times you almost feel like, is this house haunted or am I just going crazy? So if you haven't read Ruth Ware, try the Turn of the Key. I think you'll love it. My third most favorite book of the year is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. I listened to this on audio and I'm happy I did because this is written in poetry form and the author narrates this book. So the author writes slam poetry and performs it, and you can really tell it had such a powerful impact on me and it moved me so much. It's a very beautiful, heartbreaking coming-of-age story about this young girl growing up in Harlem in a very strict household. Her mother is very strict, very religious, and she tries to push her religion on her daughter. So she has to be this perfect girl who goes to school, who goes to take religious classes at the church, while all she wants is to be free and to write her poetry. So she has this leather-bound notebook in which she pours all her frustration and her thoughts. It is a poetry book, but it's interconnected poems, so it doesn't read as poetry. I'm not a big fan of poetry, but this type of poetry is almost, it's like a story. It really much reads like a novel, I think. It struck a chord with me because I grew up Catholic, and I can see where she comes from in a small sense. In some way, that's why this book felt a bit close to my heart. My second most favorite book of the year is Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson. This book is a non-fiction and it is about this lawyer in the United States who decides to help people on death row. This paints a heartbreaking picture of the justice system in the United States. You meet people through this book who have been sitting on death row for crimes they did not commit. You meet old people who have been sitting in prison for their whole lives because when they were kids they stole a loaf of bread or something like that. It is absolutely absolutely devastating. And the one thing that connects these people is that they're all black. So the injustice, the racism, the discrimination which goes on in the United States in the justice system is portrayed in a truly amazing way. It is an eye-opener, and I think even though I don't live in the States, it impacted me so much. I urge everyone to read it. If you are not into non-fiction, yes, you should read this, because this is not this is not a difficult read. And the topics, they are so important to read. And the best book I read in 2019 is Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. I knew I'm going to love this one, and when I put myself on hold on the library this summer, I think there were like 150 people waiting in front of me, and it just came in, I think, at the end of last month. I'm really happy I waited it out and read it, because it was truly amazing. Now I put myself on hold for Normal People, and yet again there were about 150 people waiting before me. But I think this is one of the books which I read and I want to own a physical copy of. So I definitely will pick up both Conversations with Friends and Normal People. I just need to own them, because these are the kind of books I think one wants to reread. So this is contemporary literary fiction, and it is mainly about two young girls who write poetry and perform poetry together. And they are then interviewed by this journalist, Melissa, and through her they meet her husband as well. And they form this bond, and this book details their relationships. So the two girls are Frances and Bobby. Frances is the quiet one, more passive one. Bobby she's talkative and friendly and bubbly. So you would think that this would be written from Bobby's perspective. I'm a bit disappointed that there weren't included some parts from Bobby's perspective, but that's the way it is. This is actually written from Frances's perspective. She's the one who actually writes the poetry. She's very introspective, very smart, and she is actually also very passive. She has a difficult background with her parents. But what most people say is that Frances, the way she is very typical of how young people are today. What I found is that she was very passive. She could not express her feelings, she could not express vulnerability, she always made the same mistakes. And I think she's so real, because you can relate to her, basically. I think that is why I really enjoyed this book so much. Now, Frances has an affair with Melissa's husband, Nick. And this book focuses mostly on that relationship. So go into it knowing that this is about an affair, but go into it knowing also that there's also some weird connection between Bobby and Melissa, and the marriage between Melissa and Nick is also quite unusual, I would say. So there's all these layers to this, and the writing is so simple yet so beautiful. So please tell me if you have read any book similar to Conversations with Friends, apart from Normal People, I think. Please tell me in the comments below, because I would really like to pick some similar books up. What do you think about my list? Have you read any of these books? I mean, some of these are pretty popular, so I guess it's no surprise that they are in lists like this one. So this is where I leave you. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.